On the 4th of November, 1884, a man of 44 rode down into the Sapper Creek country in Harlan County, Nebraska, with a saddle, a blanket roll, $9, and a bone-handled jackknife, and that was the whole of what he owned in this world. His name was Ezra Corbin. He had been born in Boone County, Missouri, in 1840, and he had not owned himself until he was 25 years old, and he had been moving ever since. Kansas, the Territory, the Panhandle, up the trail 4 times, down again, 16 years of $40 a month, and a new bunk every spring, which is a way of living that a man can keep up a long time before he notices what it has cost him. He came to the Barlow place at dusk because there was smoke and because it was going to freeze. It was a soddy and a dugout stable and 160 acres of buffalo grass broken in 3 places, and there was a woman splitting wood in the last of the light with a maul that was too heavy for her, and she stopped when she saw him and put the maul where she could reach it, which he noticed and respected. "I am looking for a night's work for a night's feed," he said, from 30 feet off, and stayed there. "I will take the stable. I do not need the house, and I will not ask for it. There is no money." "I did not ask for money, ma'am." She looked at him a while. Her name was Winnie Barlow, and she was 31, and she had come up from Kentucky in 1878 with a husband who had been dead since the 14th of June of the year before, and she had 240 pounds of wood to split before the ground froze, and 1 pair of hands to do it with. "You will sleep in the dugout, and you will not come to the house after dark for any reason," she said. "If you want water, there is the barrel. If you want anything else, you will ask me in the daylight where I can see you ask. Those are my terms, and I will not soften them, and you may take them or ride on, and there is no hard feeling in it either way." "Those are good terms," said Ezra Corbin. "I would have thought less of you for lighter ones." He had got down and had the saddle half off when the soddy door opened. 3 children came out of it into the cold, and they came out fast, and they came out the way children come out to a thing they have been waiting for, and the smallest of them ran the whole 30 feet across the frozen yard and took hold of Ezra Corbin's coat with both hands and put his face against it. "Papa," said Toby Barlow, who was 4 years old. Ezra Corbin stood in that yard with his hand on a saddle and did not move at all. The middle one, a girl of 7, stopped halfway and looked at him, and then looked at her mother, and her face went through about 4 different things and settled on none of them. The oldest boy did not come out past the doorframe. He was 10 years old, and he looked at his mother with an expression that no 10-year-old should have to make, and then he turned around and went back inside. "Toby," said Winnie Barlow. "Toby, come here to me. It is Papa." "Toby, come here." The child did not come. He had his whole self against the coat of a stranger in the dark, and he had 4 years of certainty in him, and he was not going to be talked out of it by anything as small as the truth. Ezra Corbin got the boy's hands off his coat, gently, one at a time, and crouched down so as to be the right height, and said the only thing he could think of, which was, "My name is Ezra." Then Winnie Barlow came and took her son and carried him inside, and the door shut, and the man stood in the yard in the dark with a saddle in his hands and his heart going like a horse. She came out to the dugout at 8 o'clock with a plate, in the daylight of a lantern, which was her own rule kept in the spirit if not the letter, and she set it down and did not go. "You are owed an explanation." "I am not owed anything, ma'am. You are owed this one." She stood with her arms folded against the cold. "My husband died on the 14th of June of last year, in the well he was digging, at 31 feet, when the sand ran. Marcus was 9. Pearl was 6. Toby was 3. She stopped. She started again. I did not tell them. I told them their father had gone east to earn money for the proof on this place, and would be back when he had it. I told Marcus the truth in September because he had worked it out, and it was cruel to keep on. I have never told the other two. Ezra Corbin looked at the plate. 16 months. 16 months. It got easier to keep it up and harder to end it every single week until it turned into a thing I could not put down. Her voice did not break, which was worse than if it had. So my son of 4 years old has been waiting 16 months for a man to ride into this yard at dusk with a hat on. Any man. That is not a thing that happened to you tonight, Mr. Corbin. That is a thing I built. Ma'am, I am not asking you to say it is all right. It is not all right. I am telling you, because you have got a right to know what you walked into before you decide what to do about it. And because if you ride out at first light, I do not want you carrying it as a mystery. She picked up the lantern. There is no work here worth a man staying for. The wood is a day. Take the wood and the feed and go, and I will not think a thing about it. He told himself he would be gone before sunrise. He was up at 4 and had the saddle blanket folded and the horse grained, and he came out of the dugout into that particular black cold of a Nebraska November at 4:30 in the morning, and there was a small shape sitting on the frozen ground against the dugout door. Toby Barlow had been out there some while. He had a quilt around him, and he had gone to sleep sitting up, and he woke when the door moved. He did not say anything. He got up, and he took Ezra Corbin's hand in the dark, both of his hands around two of the man's fingers, the way a 4-year-old holds on to something he has decided about, and he stood there. Ezra Corbin had given away 3 children of his own in the spring of 1869, and had not held a child's hand in 16 years. And he stood in the dark of a stranger's yard with a boy attached to his fingers, and found that his boots would not move, and he could not have told anybody why, and he did not try. He split wood for 11 days. Then he cleaned out the stable and reset the sod on the north wall of the house where the frost had got in. And then it was the middle of November, and there was the matter of the cow. And then it was the 28th, and there was the matter of the roof. And every few days he told Winnie Barlow that he would be moving on directly. And every few days she said that would be fine. And neither of them believed it by the end of the month, and neither of them said so. Marcus Barlow did not speak to him for 3 weeks. The boy did the work beside him, and did it well, and did not look at him, and Ezra Corbin let him alone, because he had a notion of what was going on in a 10-year-old who had been handed the truth and made to carry it by himself while his brother and sister were let off. On the 9th of December the boy said, over a wagon tongue they were both working on, "You are going to leave." "I have said I would." "Then leave now." Marcus did not look up. Because Toby is 4, and he will not remember Papa in 2 years, but he will remember you, and I am the one who has to be here when you go, and I have already done that once. Ezra Corbin set down the draw knife. "That is the truest thing anybody has said to me in 16 years, he said, "and I am not going to answer it with a promise, because you have had one of those and it was not kept, and I will not hand you another one to hold." Marcus Barlow looked at him then, for the first time in 3 weeks. "What will you hand me?" "Nothing," said Ezra Corbin. "You will have to watch what I do and make up your own mind, same as a grown man, and I am sorry about that. Because you are 10. It was Pearl who asked about the knife, on a Sunday in the middle of December, when he was cutting the eyes out of seed potatoes at the table because it was too cold to be anywhere else. "There is marks on it." "There is. Did you make them?" "I did." He turned the bone handle over. There were 3 shallow notches filed into the butt of it, worn soft at the edges from 16 years of a pocket. "There is one for each of my children." The whole soddy went quiet, Winnie Barlow stopped what she was doing at the stove and did not turn around. "Where are they?" said Pearl. "Missouri," said Ezra Corbin. "They are grown now. The youngest of them is 16. And that was all he said, and Pearl was 7 and did not know to push, and Winnie Barlow did not ask him about it for 9 more days, which he understood afterward had been a kindness of a very high order. The 9 days had a shape to them, and the narrator will not pretend they were eventful, because the quiet of them was the whole of their worth. It got down to 11 below on the 16th, and the 4 of them and the cow were all in the one room for 2 days, and he learned that Pearl sang under her breath when she was concentrating and did not know she was doing it, and that Marcus could do sums in his head faster than the man could do them on paper, and that Toby would fall asleep anywhere on earth if he was leaned against something warm. He mended harness. He taught Marcus to cut a scarf joint. He carried the water. He kept to the dugout after dark for 31 days, without once being reminded, which Winnie Barlow noticed on about the 4th day, and thought about a good deal more than she let on. On the 19th of December he came in at dusk with the milk, and she was sitting at the table with the account book, and she had her head in her hands, and she did not put it up when the door opened, which she had never once done in 6 weeks. $41, she said. That is what is left. Seed is 9, and the taxes are 11, and Toby has grown out of everything he owns, and it is December. Ezra Corbin set the pail down. "I have got $7. I am not taking your $7. Then I will buy the seed with it, and you may be angry at me about it in the spring, which is a long way off, and I find I am willing to wait." She laughed. It surprised her more than it surprised him. It was the first time she had made that sound in 19 months, and she put her hand over her mouth as if she had dropped something, and then she looked up at him, and he was standing about 3 feet away with his hat still on, and the cold still coming off his coat. Neither of them said anything for a while. "Mr. Corbin," she said, "you have kept to that dugout 31 days, and you have never once let me have to ask." "No, ma'am. I want you to know I counted." "I counted too," said Ezra Corbin. The distance between them at the table on the 19th of December 1884 was about 3 feet, and both of them were entirely aware of it, and neither of them had moved, and both of them were about to. Toby Barlow woke up in the box bed and asked, in the voice of a 4-year-old surfacing out of sleep in a dark room, whether it was morning. "No, baby," said Winnie Barlow. "Go on back." And Ezra Corbin took his hat off, at last, and hung it on the nail by the door, and went and sat down on the far side of the table with the account book between them, and said, "Read me the taxes again." And they went through the numbers for an hour like 2 people who had decided to be practical, and neither one of them slept much that night. If you have come this far with these people, stay with them a little longer, because what happens next is the part that decided everything. And if you find yourself moved by stories of love that arrived quiet and cost something, the bell beneath this story is how we keep meeting like this. Alvin Skeet came out from Bloomington on the 22nd of December with papers in a leather case. He was 47, and he had a good coat, and the manner of a man who has done a thing so many times that he has stopped noticing what it is, and he did not get down from the buggy. "Mrs. Barlow, I have filed a contest against entry number 1142, being your late husband's homestead entry of 1878, on grounds of failure to cultivate and failure to make the improvements required under the statute. Hearing is set at the land office at Bloomington on the 19th of February. My husband broke 40 acres of that ground. Your husband broke 31 acres in 5 years and died before final proof, and you have broken nothing since, and there is no well, and the law is the law, and I did not write it." He said it without heat, which was the worst part. "Now, I am a practical man, and I will be plain with you. You may fight that hearing, which will cost you money you have not gotten take until June. Or you may sign a relinquishment today, and I will hand you $40 cash for your trouble, and you may take your children somewhere they can be fed. $40. $40 is more than most get, ma'am. Winnie Barlow stood in her own yard in December. How many of these have you got running? Alvin Skeet's face did something very small. That is not relevant to your situation. How many? Mr. Skeet, good day, Mrs. Barlow. He picked up the lines. Then he stopped and looked past her at the dugout, where a man of 44 was standing with a bucket. One more matter, and I will say it once, and I would ask you to hear it as advice, and not as anything else. The register at Bloomington is a Methodist. If it should come out at that hearing that there has been an unmarried man living on this claim with a widow and 3 small children since November, you will not lose the land on the cultivation. You will lose it on the other thing. And you may lose more than the land. He drove off. It was Ezra Corbin who broke first. That night, and he broke in the direction of leaving, which was the only direction he had ever known how to break in. I will go in the morning. There is no argument in it, Winnie. That man has told you exactly how they will do it, and I am the how. Then he wins in the morning instead of February. He wins either way. He wins slower if I am gone. Sit down, said Winnie Barlow. He did not sit down. You want to know why I will not stay, and I am going to tell you, and then I am going to go, and I would be obliged if you would let me get through it. He had the knife out. He was not looking at her. I was married in '62. Her name was Sarah. We were not free, and we were not married in any way the state of Missouri would have owned, but we were married. She died in '68, having the third one. I was 8 and 20, and I had 3 children under 6 and no people, and a job that took me off the place 11 days out of 14. Ezra. In the spring of '69, I took them to Sarah's sister at Fayette. It was for a season. I was going to earn and come back. He turned the knife over. I came back in '70 with $110. They were fed, and they were in school, and the baby did not know me from a post, and Sarah's sister's husband stood in the road and asked me what I thought I was doing. And I looked at those 3 children, and I could not think of one single thing I had that was better than what they already had. He stopped. So I said all right, and I got on my horse. And I have been on it ever since. The stove ticked. 16 years, he said. I have been telling myself that was the loving thing, and about 6 of those years I have believed it. Now a woman asks me to stay with 3 small children, and I want to, and I find I do not trust the man being asked, because I know exactly what he does when it gets hard. He decides it would be better for everybody if he went. He has a beautiful reason every time. Winnie Barlow crossed the room. Do you know what I have been doing for 16 months? She said. I have been telling my babies a lie, because the truth was too heavy for me to carry in front of them. You have been running for 16 years, and I have been lying for 16 months, and we have both of us been protecting children from something by giving them something worse. And I am not going to stand in my own house and let you claim you are the only coward in it. Winnie, stay, she said. Not because of the hearing, not because a man in a buggy said a thing about a Methodist. Stay, because my children already call you Papa, and I have stopped correcting them, and I am ashamed of that, and I am asking you anyway. What passed between them then was brief, and it was the first for either of them in a long while, and what broke open in him was not longing, but the plain, unbearable relief of being wanted by a woman who had been handed the worst account of him in his own words, and had asked for him after. He went down the well on the 11th of January. There was no cultivation he could do in January, and there was no fence he could build in frozen ground. But there was a hole in the yard 31 feet deep, with a dead man's shovel still in the bottom of it. And a well was an improvement. And an improvement was what the statute wanted. Winnie Barlow did not want him in that hole, and said so for 4 days, and then did the thing that mattered more, which was that she told him precisely how her husband had died. He cribbed the top 11 feet, and then he stopped, because the clay held, and he thought he was through the bad ground. He was not through it. There is a sand seam at 29 feet, and it runs when it is wet, and he was down there in June after a week of rain. She had a stick, and she was drawing it in the ash on the hearth. You will crib the whole of it, every foot, and you will go down in the morning when it is froze, and you will come up at noon, and Marcus will be on the windlass, and I will be on the rope, and if I say up, you will come up without one word of argument, or I will not let you go down at all. He went down for 9 days, and cribbed as he went, and got to 38 feet on the 20th of January, and struck water at 4 in the afternoon. And it came in cold and clean, and it was the best water in that section of the county. The sand ran on the 21st, when he went down to set the last of the cribbing. It came in at 29 feet the way she had said it would, above him, and it took the cribbing with it, and it filled the shaft to 19 feet in about 4 seconds, and it buried Ezra Corbin from the chest down at the bottom of a hole 38 feet under a Nebraska January. What happened in the next 2 hours is the reason there are people in Harlan County today. Marcus Barlow, 10 years old, did not run for help, because the nearest help was 4 miles, and his mother had already started shouting orders. He stayed on the windlass, and he held it. And he held it for 2 hours and 10 minutes, with his sister sitting on the crank arm for the counterweight, and when it was over his hands, had to be opened by somebody else. Winnie Barlow went down the rope herself. She had 31 years of life, and she had already stood at the top of that hole once, on the 14th of June of 1883, and had been told to stay up top by 3 men who knew better, and had done it, and had spent 19 months finding out what obedience costs. She did not stay up top the second time. She went down past the sand into a hole that had killed her husband 19 months before, and she cleared the man's head and chest with her hands, and then she came back up and rigged the cribbing exactly the way she had watched Tom Barlow fail to rig it, hauling the sawn cottonwood down 2 boards at a time on the rope, while her son held the windlass and her daughter of 7 sat on the crank, arm for the weight, and she shored that shaft from 19 feet down to 26, alone, in the dark of a well, in 4 trips. They got him out at 20 minutes past 6 in the evening. He had a broken ankle and 2 cracked ribs, and he was so cold he could not say anything for an hour. The first thing he said, when he could, was to Marcus, and it was, "You held it." "Yes, sir," said Marcus Barlow. The hearing was on the 19th of February 1885 at the land office at Bloomington, and it did not go the way Alvin Skeet had arranged for it to go. It went badly for him from the moment the register asked about the well, because there was a well, 38 feet, cribbed the whole way, on a claim that had been alleged to have no improvements, and there were 9 neighbors from the Sapper Creek settlement in that room, who had all watered stock at it in January. And it went worse when Winnie Barlow, who had spent $4 she did not have on a copy clerk in Bloomington in January, put in front of the register a list of 19 contests filed by Alvin Skeet in 4 counties in 6 years, of which 17 had ended in relinquishment for cash, and not one had ever gone to a full hearing. Alvin Skeet's contest was dismissed on the 24th of February. He filed no further contests in that district. The register at Bloomington, who was indeed a Methodist, wrote a letter to the General Land Office about the practice, which is still in the file. Nobody in that room ever raised the other matter at all. The narrator would like to record that this was not because the country was kind, because it was not, but because 9 neighbors had come 4 miles in February and were sitting in the back, with their hats in their hands. And there is a thing that happens in a room when people show up. Ezra Corbin and Winnie Barlow were married at the Sapper Creek settlement on the 4th of April, 1885, 5 months to the day after he rode down into that country with $9. He told the children about their father in March, before the wedding, and not after, because Winnie asked him to, and because it was the thing he had failed to do at 8 and 20, and had spent 16 years not doing. He sat down with Pearl and with Toby, who was 5 by then, and he told them the truth plainly, and did not soften it, and did not leave the room afterward. And Toby did not understand it for 2 more years, and Pearl understood it that night, and both of them were angry at their mother for a long while, and she let them be, and it healed the way that heals, which is slowly and not completely. Ezra Corbin wrote to Fayette, Missouri, in the summer of 1885. He got an answer in September from his middle child, a daughter of 20, and it was not a warm letter, and he wrote back anyway. They wrote for 9 years. She came out once, in 1893, and stayed 11 days, and it was awkward and difficult, and neither of them ever regretted it. The other 2 never wrote, and he never stopped sending the letters, and the narrator declines to pretend that was mended, because it was not. They proved up on the 160 acres in 1886. They farmed it 41 years. Marcus Barlow took it over in 1912, and his sister ran the school at Sapper Creek for 30 years, and Toby Barlow went to Lincoln and came back, which nobody expected. The knife stayed in his pocket the whole of his life, and the narrator will tell you the only thing about it that matters. There were 3 notches in the butt of that bone handle when Ezra Corbin rode into Harlan County on the 4th of November 1884. There were 6 when he died. He filed the other 3 himself, on the evening of the 4th of April, 1885, sitting on the step of a soddy with a wedding still going on inside it. And he did not tell anybody he was doing it, and Marcus Barlow, who was 11 by then, and who had been watching that man to make up his own mind same as a grown man, saw him do it from the doorway, and never said a word about it to a living soul until he was 70 years old. If your heart has ever leaned toward a story where love arrived quiet and stayed long enough to change everything, then this story was for you. Out on the Sapper Creek country, where the wind keeps the only memory of what was, the love between Ezra Corbin and Winnie Barlow became the kind that does not need anybody to remember it to be real. Though that settlement remembered it anyway, every time somebody hauled cold water out of a 38-foot well and told the children whose hands had cribbed it. If stories of frontier love that endured through hardship, prejudice, and the kind of silence only the West knows speak to you, follow the Lonesome Trail for more. Here, the love stories are quiet, the courage is real, and the last word is always worth the wait. Until the next trail.